Hey everybody, what's up? And welcome to the garden. Today we are, it's time for the dahlias to come out. We had these beautiful, gorgeous dahlias. We had dinner plates and ball dahlias and decorative ones, and they were stunning and we loved them. But of course, everything that's good cannot last. So we had our frost. Well, technically, we had our freeze. We just skipped the frost and jumped right to the freeze. And now that we've had this freeze, everything has started to die. Which is a good thing in terms of our, digging our dahlias and storing them for the winter so that we can save them and plant them again in the spring and start this whole beautiful process over again, which, of course will be awesome. I'm always excited to start digging the tubers in the fall because I'm always eager to see how many new tubers the plants have made and how I can divide them and how I can grow my stores of dahlias. And I think as you see this video and as you begin to, watch me divide the tubers, you can see how once you start collecting dahlia tubers, they multiply very, very quickly when they're grown under ideal conditions. And of course, some plants, some varieties of dahlias will make more tubers than others. You'll see that as well. But before we can start digging, we want to make sure that a freeze has thoroughly killed these plants back and that the plants have turned just a gross black color. You can see my leaves and my stems and everything have been thoroughly affected by the frost and freeze. And once that happens and turned this black color, I'm just going to go through with my pair of garden snips and I'm going to trim this top growth off. I'm going to leave about, I'd say about 6 to 8 inches of stem left in the garden just so I can easily see where the tubers actually are, in the planting. I should also mention that if you are planning to save your tubers, of course, you want to make sure before the frost hits, you want to make sure that they are labeled very, very well because, once the frost comes, all the flowers are wiped out and everything. You're not going to be able to tell which variety is which. And I learned that from experience myself. The first year I grew dahlias, I didn't have any labels. I didn't know what anything was. I should also mention that I am here in Kentucky. I'm in zone 6B7. And dahlias are technically not hardy to my zone, so I cannot leave them in the ground over winter. However, several growing zones, you can just leave them in the ground over winter and they will return. So it will be up to you to kind of do that research and decide which method is right for you. In the past, I've had dahlias return. Ones that I've accidentally left in the ground while I was digging have had them return with no protection. I think in the future I would like to experiment more with leaving the dahlia tubers in the ground here in my zone. But for now, I have a very small garden with limited space. So I'm just going to go ahead and dig all these tubers up so that I can plant my tulip bulbs where these tubers are because, fall is here and I've got to get a move on. I've got to make sure that everything is running smooth as the winter time approaches. I'm not looking forward to cold weather, that's for sure. Anyway, after I've cut all these stems back to about 6 to 8 inches, I am just going to remove all of this foliage from the garden. Next comes a little bit of a waiting game. I like to wait about a week after I've cut the stems. The main reason for waiting a week, a lot of people suggest that this waiting period allows the eyes on the tubers to really start to develop. I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but I think it is a good practice, especially if you are going to consider dividing the tubers in the fall, like I'm going to be dividing these tubers in the fall. Of course, you can divide the tubers in the springtime as well, but I like to just go ahead and get it done. That way, when spring does come, I'll be ready to plant. So after we have cut those back and allowed for our ample time to pass, next, it's time to start digging the tubers. Now, a lot of people use, garden forks and things. I don't have a garden fork. I will just go ahead and be totally honest with you guys. So I'm using a shovel. A shovel is not the ideal implement for this job simply because I have sliced more tubers in half than I can even count. But, we're just going to go ahead and go with it anyway. What I like to do is I like to get my shovel about 8 inches from the stem of the plant, and I find that this is generally a safe distance depending on the variety. Sometimes I slice through the tuber on especially big varieties, but most of them this is a pretty safe distance. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to work the shovel down into the ground and gently lift up this tuber out of the ground. It really is that simple, and as you can see, it came out of the ground great. This spot in the yard is really well amended anyway, with a lot of good compost rather than my heavy clay that I get a lot of times. And once I get that out of the ground, all I'm going to do is just do my best to knock off as much of that dirt as possible. And I am going to just, store it over here away in my wheelbarrow for now. And I'm going to continue moving down the line and, digging tubers. I have about, I want to say 200 tubers to dig, different plant clusters to dig. As I dug them, I found that some of them had completely withered away. And that's probably my fault just because I planted the tubers so close because I was trying to save space. So some of them did wither away, which I was disappointed about. So I have kind of a list of replacements that I need to buy for the next year. But overall, we had a really, really good amount of tubers to harvest. You can see here in this wheelbarrow, this is just the first day that I started to dig the tubers. I did this over a 2-day period. It didn't really take long per se. It's just, a matter of finding the time. And I did want to make sure to get this done as soon as possible here because we had just like a solid week of nice, beautiful weather. And I know in the fall that the weather can change in an instant and it can be cold and rainy and miserable. So when it comes to digging my dahlia tubers, I really, really want to make certain that I am, kind of planning ahead. Now, once I have all these tubers in my wheelbarrow, all I'm going to do is I am going to rinse them off with a garden hose. The reason I put them in the wheelbarrow is because I don't like wasting water. It's, I try to make everything as efficient as possible when I'm cleaning these tubers. I'm going to clean these tubers and I'm going to set them out in the yard and I am going to let them dry for a day. No freezing temperatures tonight. Make sure there's no freezing temperatures forecast. I don't set them on concrete. It seems like the concrete really, really dries them out, so I don't do it there, but I just set them out in the yard for about a day. And then once that happens, once they've been out, usually the next day I will go through and I will start looking for eyes and kind of dividing them up. Now, if you've never divided dahlia tubers before, it can be totally just confusing. And don't worry, when in doubt, you can always just plant the clump. It's not a big deal. There's several ways to do this. If you have more experience, I seriously doubt you need my video to help you because I'm not the most experienced dahlia grower, that's for sure. I'm very much learning all the time here on this channel. What I personally like to do is once these tubers are clean, I like to snip off that top stem. I want to snip it off as close to the base of these tubers as possible. Now, we do not want to cut any of the necks of the tubers. This is very important, okay? Do not cut the necks of the tubers. In order to grow and in order to have an eye, that tuber needs to be attached to that kind of stem base that we have that connects all the tubers together. It needs a piece of that, okay? If you cut the neck of the tuber, it's not going to grow. So I'm going to just get rid of the main stalk, the tall stalk that we left on there, because that can promote rot. Water can get in there, can cause rot in storage. It's just we don't want it there. Also, I'm going to trim the kind of scraggly ends of the tubers. I'm going to go ahead and cut those off as well. Again, we're not cutting large portions of the tubers. We're just kind of trimming things up, making things nice. It's also important that when you are dividing your tubers, you need to be cleaning your tools, okay? The last thing I want to do is introduce viruses to all my tubers. I think I did a pretty good job of, kind of checking my plants and making sure everything looked as it should. But even so, I'm sure there's some virus in my dahlias. It's inevitable, especially, when you buy them from a bunch of different sources and wholesalers and things. It's just inevitable. It's probably unavoidable, honestly. I don't know enough about it, but I do know that you need to be cleaning the tools. So I do have a bleach solution to clean my tools as I am doing this between each different variety of tubers. If you want more information of that, you can check out the American Dahlia Society website, because that's kind of the guidelines that I went by in learning to clean my tubers. I know I'm rambling, but it's important. It's important to know. So I've cut off that stem, and I've cleaned off the kind of scraggly bits at the end of each tuber, the kind of, I guess, roots. If I can see an eye on the tuber, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and separate it from the main clump and make an individual tuber. If I can't see any of the eyes, what I like to do is just kind of go ahead and cut the tuber in half. You can see when I cut these tubers in half, again, I am going through the center of where that stem used to be. I'm not cutting them, horizontally. I'm making a vertical cut where that stem used to be. We need that top part of the tuber. I hope that I am being clear. I hope I am making sense. I am doing my best to make sense with this, but it really was something I struggled with when I first learned how to do it, because it seemed like no matter what I read or what I watched, there wasn't enough information for me to understand it. So hopefully I'm being clearer. So after I've gone through and divided all of my tubers, all I'm going to do is wash them one last time, get any of the dirt and grime off, because, soil can cause rot as well. Just want to get those as clean as possible. Some people choose to do like a fungicide dip. I personally don't do that, so I can't speak as to whether or not that will impact how our tubers store or anything. After they have been washed a final time, I do lay them out just once again, usually 1 to 2 days, just to get most of that moisture, kind of just dry them out just a little bit from our last wash, and then it is going to be time to store them. What I like to do personally, there are tons of different ways to store these. First and foremost, you want to find a place that is cool but does not freeze, obviously. I usually store mine in my basement. Now, my basement is not the ideal place. It's a little bit warm. It's a heated basement, but I store them in a dark closet down there. What I like to do personally is I get a garbage bag and I fill that garbage bag with vermiculite, coarse vermiculite. So I'll put vermiculite in, and then a layer of tubers, and then more vermiculite, and then more tubers. This is not really ideal, I don't think, because I do store them all together. And you probably shouldn't do that because, of course, if one tuber starts to rot, that can very quickly spread to other tubers. So I think most people tend to wrap each variety individually, which is something to consider. Again, I am not an expert. I am just sharing with you what I do. So I'm sure the process could also be done with individual bags or maybe boxes. I know some people like to use airtight containers. I personally don't use an airtight container. When I put my tubers into the bag, I just leave that bag open. Leaving the bag open, I feel like just lets a little bit of air circulate, and it's easier to go into the basement and check on the tubers. During the winter, I make sure to check the tubers about once a month and just kind of dig around in the bag, make sure that nothing is rotting, make sure everything looks good, and really make adjustments from there. Some people use moss to store tubers. I've used moss in the past, and I found that it really, really dried out my tubers. So I haven't used that for a couple seasons. It really just depends on your own preferences. I'm sure it depends on your climate, where you are. I think really the best solution for learning how to best store your tubers specifically is a little bit of trial and error, of course, and doing your own research online, because there are tons of sites available to help you learn how to store your tubers over winter so that you can save them and plant them again next year. That's really about it for this video. I so hope that it was helpful. I'm not quite sure if it was. Again, I'm just speaking from my own experiences, so I wanted to share them because growing dahlias is so fun. If you're new to the channel and you're not already subscribed, be sure to subscribe. We'd absolutely love to have you. We're making new content all the time about cut flowers and all kinds of stuff. Be sure to tell your friend, all that good stuff. We're just growing our little gardening community here on YouTube. If you want to support the channel, links to Patreon and my soap shop and everything are down in the comments below. That's really about it. I hope that you guys are having such an incredible day, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye, guys.